And we are live. Welcome everybody to Lubbock Compact Live for Wednesday, June 9th. I'm Adam Hernandez. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Nick Bergfeld. And we've had a little bit of stuff going on this week and recently down at the city council level. So Nick, what do we got going on?
Yeah. So, this week, a couple different happenings. The big one for us was the charter review committee presentation that they gave to the city council. And so there were some folks that were able to attend that. They did not allow for public comments to be given on this topic, but there was a lengthy presentation that was given by the chair of the Charter Review Committee, John Arnold, where he summarized some of the various aspects of what they were recommending. Not all of what they're recommending was actually included in the presentation. We'll talk about that in a second. But then it was interesting to see the back and forth between Chairman Arnold and the city council. And there were actually some fiery moments where both Councilman Chavez and Councilman Patterson Harris kind of challenged and pushed back on some of the recommendations or some of the statements that uh, Chairman Arnold was making. And so, Adam, you were able to be present for that meeting. What were your impressions? How did you feel about it as it was going on?
Yeah, it kind of went how I expected it. I expected him to take some sort of angle that they got all the input and they heard all the input and they did the best they could, because this is the narrative that not only have we heard from them during this process, but we hear this from every committee. And honestly, I'm really starting to get frustrated more so with these with what I've noticed that's a troubling trend for me since I've started getting involved in this since last year. And the trend is that it seems to appear that when they have a public comment, and this has been at both the city council level a lot of times and at committee levels, when they have a public hearing or a public comment section, it seems to be that it's just for them to check a box on their side, because they don't really care to listen apparently to what the majority of the folks are saying. And so you still end up in a situation where it's like the majority of the thought processes in Lubbock, or the minority, excuse me, of the thought processes in Lubbock usually end up winning out. And so like you said, I was glad to hear Councilman Chavez and Ms. Sheila Patterson Harris push back on this, because what Mr. Arnold didn't know apparently, and I didn't even know until he said it, Chavez had actually watched all of the Zoom. He'd been on the Zooms for
That was
all,
a good. That
all
was a
of
good
the
moment.
meetings. Yeah. And so I was like, oh wow. And so at that point, James Arnold seemed to be a little, kind of thrown off by that, because his line wasn't really going how he planned it to go. So I also liked and I'll hand it back off to you after this, but I liked the one part also where he kind of addressed Miss Gibson, the Karen Gibson, who's been a former city council person, and she was the representative from District 5 on this committee. Her statement regarding that, oh well, I had a job when I was a city council person, which is a little different. That's a little misleading, because she's a business owner, so that's not a job. And so I really liked that Councilman Chavez was. He said something to the effect of like, that's good that you were able to do that, but would you be able to have that story if you were an HV tech, or a plumber or a teacher or something. And so I thought that was really good. I know there was some other things. What did you catch
Oh
from this
yeah.
meeting?
I mean, so I did love that comment as well, because hearing Councilman Chavez say those things, and to push back forcefully in talking about his own experience as a council member. And then also, I think there's a part of it too where he's mindful of the fact that there's good fortune for him that he is retired and is able to have enough income to do that work. And I think he's also quite aware of how many of the other members of the council are there by nature of wealth, right? And essentially they either were wealthy to begin with, or by the point in time that they had pursued city council, they had come into a significant amount of wealth. And it was refreshing because hearing one of the council members who has had a working class kind of job, he was a journalist for a lot of his life, to say those things and to just be honest. I mean, one of the challenges that I have seen as part of this process is it feels like we're not having conversations in good faith about what the fundamental issue is, which is that about 80% of Lubbock's adult population cannot financially afford to be a city council person.
Yeah,
You know?
and I liked that part too. That brings up another point he brought up, which was inclusivity, which is something we've been talking about a lot on this issue. And I'm glad that he got that into the conversation early. And just for everybody listening, this is really early in this conversation on the council level. This is the first time they were presented with this. Many of them, I think actually outside of Chavez, I don't know that any of them attended or watched any of those meetings. If they did, they didn't mention that. But we do know that that pretty much one of them kept up with the process. The others, it was the first time they were hearing this. And so there's still a chance for folks to get their voices heard on this issue. But that's what we were talking about, was inclusivity. Like Nick just said, a big part of the population just can't even do it. It doesn't matter how passionate you are. It doesn't have anything to do with you don't want to bad enough. And I know that I can speak for a lot of folks out there because we've heard this from folks. And that's a big thing that we're trying to get across to the council and to these committees, is that Lubbock Compact doesn't just come in here and it's just, oh, whatever Nick and Adam decided, or whatever, the board of Lubbock Compact decided, that's what we're going to advocate for and do. No, the words and statements that we bring in when we're doing these public comments are based off of direct input from the citizens. That's what we're driven by first, is citizen input first. We don't put, of course, we all each have our own individual stances on these things, but we're in there advocating for what the majority of folks want. Chavez and Sheila pushed back and said that, he said that he had heard in text messages and private emails and all these different things, the other side. And so how they were trying to make it look, and then we can move on, was like, oh, well, we heard all the input and it was about equal, the amount of people who were for a living wage and the people who weren't for a living wage. And that's just fundamentally false. I don't care what numbers you look at. If you look at our poll, overwhelming majority in support of a living wage. If you look at the poll that the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce did, that this point they omitted from their original blog post on the results of their survey because it didn't fit their narrative. And you can send them to me if they would like to rebut that. But that's what it appears like. If they would like to clean that up, they can. But they omitted that because I feel like it didn't fit their narrative. And what it was that something like 80-something% of the people were actually in support of raising the city council's wage to fit the rate of inflation from 1923 or whatever, which would have actually been closer to what we're now advocating for, which is $20,000 a year for city council and $30,000 a year for mayor. It was like 20-something thousand or something if you adjusted it for inflation. So
yeah, and that's, I mean, 30,000 for the mayor, 20,000 for the city council. Just from a perspective standpoint, if those were the numbers, and even if we're including compensation like health insurance, things like that is a component of it, that is, from a city expenditure standpoint, less than 0.01% increase of the amount of expenditures that we would have. It is such, when you think about the scale of the issue and the cost to resolve it, it is such a tiny amount of money that is necessary to fix this. And I've yet to encounter or see or hear or speak with someone who can make an argument as to why preventing such an enormous amount of your population from being in a position of elected office makes sense. How is that not elitist? How is it not exclusive? How is it not discriminatory to the working class community that is the majority of the city? The fact that we are a working class town and have effectively no working class representation on this council is, it's sort of wild to me in that way, and in how that's played out. But to move on with the topics, one quick thing just to, and this really is just to just get people excited over time, a quick parks update. So we had mentioned last week that the city is going through a parks downtown, or a parks master planning process, as well as the downtown park, as well as a open spaces plan to kind of think about things that are managed by the city, or considered to be part of the sort of overall green space of the city, but aren't technically park. Right. So something to be a parkland is a special kind of designation that the state of Texas also has to weigh in on when something becomes specifically a dedicated park. But one of the nice things that is happening, because we have a new director overseeing Parks and Recreation, and he's just highly motivated. It's exciting and refreshing to see what can happen when somebody in civil service, a civil servant, is motivated and is passionate about seeing improvement in their community. And so just even last week, he gave feedback and a report to the city council on some of the reforms that he's put together in the Parks Department already. And one big one that I didn't even really understand or recognize was that our city before him had not been broken up into zones for taking care of the parks. So you could never say, you would never have a relationship with, say, with the police, where they do patrol in the same place and the same person, and the idea is to develop a relationship with the community. For Parks and Rec, that was never happening. But not only that, but these small groups of individuals were effectively running all over the city to do that one individual task, like say mowing the lawn or something like that. Well, that's contracted out, but maintaining the park in some way. And now that this reform has changed, now they're essentially going to be given a park that they'll own. So there'll be a series of teams where they'll own an area or regions of parks in Lubbock to take care of them and make sure that they're doing well. And just overall, it's just a better model for a city our size, because it allows for relationships to develop, and it allows for civil servants, for that staff to feel buy-in, right? They can start to have a sense of ownership over the parks that they are maintaining and being stewards of. And so, just one thing, y'all get excited about parks. I think that we're going to see a lot of changes happen on parks over the next couple of years in the city. And really, I think it'll be a new day for green space here. So just wanted to give a little shout out for that. Next, this is something that we haven't talked about in quite a while, but it was one of the first issues that we were involved in, the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee. So this is the group that was involved in impact fees and the impact fee fight over the summertime. So impact fees are all about who pays for roads in our community. And this committee, which citizen output and citizen input over time has been really huge in this, is going to meet again for the first time in quite a while on the 11th. And they are allowing public comment. And the whole point of this meeting for them is to get an update on what has happened between when they started to make recommendations on impact fees and how the developers have responded. And we have a little bit of insights on that already from what people have said. And Adam, you've been involved in these conversations since day one. Just kind of curious what do you think the Capital Improvements Committee will hear about? What's sort of changed since they came together? And what do you wish Lubbock citizens to know on impact fees and what needs to change?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know specifically what they'll be discussing, but I would assume that it has something to do with the fact that the impact fees are now starting. The grace period was up in, I can't remember the exact date, but I believe, or it comes up soon. One of those two. So I would assume there's an update there. There's been something that happened that we knew would happen when impact fees got instated. Because just a quick reminder for everybody, and also just a quick reminder before the quick reminder, if you have questions, as always, you can put those in the Facebook comments. You can put them in on the Zoom Q&A. So anyway, first of all, just a quick reminder about how this all went down. A lot of folks in the development community didn't want impact fees at all. When they realized that they were probably going to lose that fight, that impact fees were coming. Then they tried their hardest to not have water and sewer in there. Water and sewer got put in there, but got put in at zero. So at least it's in there, which is good. That's a good thing. So that the city council later can decide to up that, obviously. The structure of the impact fees as they stand right now, as they were passed last year, was for a new project, so for a new road or anything to be built out, for every $1 the developers pay, we as taxpayers pay $3. So not really happy with that part of it. But the interesting thing that happened that I was talking about that we knew would happen once they got instated was that there was a mad dash by a lot of developers to pull plats. And the plat is just basically a big, huge piece of land that they're going to put a subdivision on. And so there was a big mad rush to do that before this deadline comes up. So again, not exactly sure what they're going to talk about. I would assume they're going to get an update on that the grace period is over and this is what it looks like going forward.
Yeah, and for folks, what the amount of numbers or the amount of money that we're talking about on an annual basis, if the city of Lubbock maximized impact fees, so that means that developers pay the maximum amount of what the state of Texas allows for cities to have them pay, it would raise somewhere around maybe $14-15 million a year. And the estimation for what we have done instead is much closer to around 7 million or so. And on top of that, it's going to be interesting to see the final accounting on the number of new housing permits that have happened over this period in time. Even whenever Mayor Pope gave his State of the City address earlier on in the year, there had already been 1,400 new housing permits that had been pulled. And the challenge here is not necessarily that new housing is a bad thing. The challenge is the way in which that new housing is being built, where it's being built in the community, and the style that it's being built in are the aspects that are both unsustainable and inequitable to the Lubbock citizenry because of who is paying for those roads and the cost of them and who pays for their maintenance. And so what's effectively happened then is we subsidize, Lubbock citizens subsidize, somewhere around $9 to $10 million a year now as we go forward, because we don't have developers pay their fair share of impact fees. So as we, last news item before we go into the interviews, for the interview, the Comprehensive Plan Oversight Committee is going to meet again in the coming days. And this committee has been involved heavily in the conversations around the Unified Development Code. The Comprehensive Plan Oversight Committee, they have oversight in their name. They were created as part of the Plan Lubbock 2040 process that created the city's new land use plan, and a lot of recommendations for how the city should grow over time came from that. And when they meet on the 14th, they're going to be discussing one of the final parts of the Unified Development Code. So this is the thing that governs zoning and codes in our city, what buildings are supposed to look like, if you have too much stuff in your front yard, what counts as a nuisance, those types of things. It plays a role in that. And they're going to be hearing about a really important section, which is on non-conforming uses. So non-conforming uses means that there's something that exists in an area where it shouldn't be. So something has been zoned one kind of thing, and the property that is there, the asset that is there, is not that kind of thing. So the example that we care a lot about is industrial sites. So as an example, the city of Lubbock could change the zoning for industrial sites in Lubbock to what's called transitional. If they were to do that, the industrial sites would be considered non-conforming zoning. And so that means that they are no longer legally properly there in that they can't continue to utilize or build additional things on that property related to industrial activity. But the challenge, though, is that it doesn't necessarily go far enough unless the city adopts a new kind of policy, a new kind of ordinance related to amortization. And Adam, you've had a chance to look in on this topic and to see this. So, what do you hope to see out of the meeting and with amortization?
Yeah, so we've actually been trying to mobilize folks around this. So if this is something that you are interested in helping with, if you're not from the community of East Lubbock or North Lubbock, basically what's going on here is that there's industrial areas right up against neighborhoods. There's a whole long history of why that is, but that's what the big issue is. And this is not uncommon. This happens in a lot of cities across the US. And so we do have some examples of cities who have changed this setup, this arrangement, or have started to, we should say. Um, and so one of the things that we know is an option is called amortization. And what that basically means is that obviously, let's say the city decided they want these things to move. Like Nick was saying, we change the zoning where they're sitting to transitional, and all of these kind of things. So um, the companies, there's company owners, there's landowners, there's different stakeholders in these properties, obviously, and so we do need to address that from that standpoint, right? So of course it wouldn't really, though that's a major health risk to people's lives, there's also the aspect of, is that fair to ask a business to move on their own dime and everything else? um, there's a lot of costs that come with that, right? So one thing cities can do is have amortization in their UDC. And what amortization is just a process of where the city, first of all, let me preface this. If we get amortization in the UDC, nothing changes immediately. It just gives the city the option to do this. So if they put amortization in the UDC and then later on the city decided that they want these things to move, then they would approach those companies and say, what are your costs? What all is this gonna cost you to move this thing to somewhere else? And so there, we would obviously know those numbers, and the city would then, through various processes, fund that, right? So then you would have a fund there to help with those costs for those businesses to move. So it's almost like a partnership between the city and those companies to address this issue. And so we're advocating for folks to, if you can email your comments in, that's citizencomments@mylubbock.us. You can email them anytime up until the day before, I think at 5 p.m. of the meeting, which is on the 14th.
The 14th at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
So Monday, the 14th at 10 a.m.
Yeah. And then amortization, it's a weird word, I know. It's spelled AMORTIZATION. You can Google it if you if you need to look it up again. But yeah, and just tell them that you're in support of amortization being in the UDC. It doesn't have to be a long drawn out email. Or if you'd like to speak your comment, please do join us, or watch on Zoom, or even come to just sit in the building with us as we make comments on this issue. But that's the big thing is this is a critical time, and we should really get that in there, because if we don't get it in there, then the city just doesn't even have that option later on. So.
Yeah, and so they're really important conversations happening in Lubbock right now that are going to play an impact in our future for decades to come. And so if you can, please, submit a comment saying that you support the idea of moving the industrial sites, having amortization as part of the Unified Development Code. Monday, the 14th at 10 a.m. is that next meeting. So that's it for the news. And so back to you, Adam.
Yeah, so if you are enjoying listening to the show and you want to support what we're doing, please consider donating at lubbockcompact.com/donate. Each and every dollar you give is going to go right into doing the work that we do and putting together the show, which is part of the work that we do. And so we appreciate each and every donation. Every bit helps. We just do this because we love the mission of Lubbock Compact. We love the city. We want to see a better Lubbock. So please go to lubbockcompact.com/donate and make a donation if you feel led to do that. Also, if you would like to volunteer, you can go to lubbockcompact.com/volunteer. We have different opportunities for folks, or you may have an idea of your own of some way that you may be able to help the Compact's mission, and we're always open to that as well. And so now we are going to bring on our guest. And so joining us today is Grant Gurlick. Grant served in the cultural heritage field for over 2 decades as the director of several museums and a board member of nonprofit historical organizations. His involvement with these institutions has instilled in him the value of community outreach and engagement. Grant, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here, and I appreciate you giving me a platform to discuss what we do and what we're all about at Outreach and Engagement and all the events that we're working on right now.
Yeah, and so we're going to get into an interesting event that we're doing. But before we do that, can you tell the listeners? I know you're not originally from Lubbock, so can you tell the listeners a little bit about your background? How did you get here? The kind of origin story of Grant Gurlick.
I'll keep it short. I'm not going to say it was a cold December evening in 1961 when my mother was taking down the Christmas tree. Anyway, I'm originally from New York, Long Island. Went to school in Richmond, Virginia. Lived there for 10 years, then moved off to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My background is sales, originally sales, and I was an area manager for a textile rental company in Pittsburgh, and decided that I really wanted to do something else. So at the age of 38, I started volunteering at Soldiers and Sailors Military Museum in Pittsburgh. And, it's, Grand Army of the Republic. So they had Civil War reenactors there. And when we first had an event, I was amazed that nobody showed up. We had all these reenactors shooting guns and stuff. I'm like, man, nobody's here.
It does sound pretty cool.
So I'm thinking, there's got to be a better way to sort of advertise and get people interested in this, because this is living history. So fast forward, went to school, museum studies, and became a director of a museum where I started off actually as a curator of collections at Soldiers and Sailors, and then I got involved in the Lawrenceville Historical Society, which is the Lawrenceville section of Pittsburgh. And my duties were pretty much I became the president, promote, and it fit in with sales. So it's kind of this weird thing that sales and cultural heritage sort of fit together. So I became the director of a museum, once again, beating the bushes, trying to promote, get people interested, coming up with programs, events, kite events, the Overholt Cup, so on and so forth. So now, of course, I've moved around a couple of places and director of a couple of other museums, moved to Oak Park, Illinois. I was on the board of the Oak Park River Forest Historical Society, the Ernest Hemingway Foundation of Oak Park. Once again, getting involved in my deal was on the board. I was in charge of promotion and trying to bring in money. So once again, whenever you're in sales, you sort of get sucked into these things. And moved to from Chicago, moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, director of the Mercy Heritage Center, the National Archives for the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas. My wife Bella was in Alaska. She was recruited to go to Tech, and that's a lot closer than Fairbanks, Alaska. My mother-in-law was moving in with her, and it was for me to help out. It's like, okay, well, I'll come to Lubbock. So we searched around and realized Tech Terrace was the place to be, so we moved to Tech Terrace. I show up at the meetings at the Tech Terrace Unit Neighborhood Association, and I have a pulse, so they made me president. So once again, serving on these boards and a message to people out there, all sorts of service, what you all are doing, what people do for the Tech Terrace Unit Neighborhood Association, get involved. Community involvement, that's service. You hear a lot, oh, thank you for your service. Well, there's service. I'm not getting anything out of it except doing a good turn for the community, for society. And that's what you do. It's very, very important. So when I moved here, I was in the archives at the Southwest Collection, And then after meeting with Dr. John Opperman with the new Outreach and Engagement Department, hearing my background and what I do and my sales pitch, and it's like, oh, okay, outreach. That's what you do. And it's like, yeah, that's what I've been doing. Yeah, since the linen company, doing 20 cold calls a day, walking into
Yeah,
business.
and Grant, I feel like I have to talk you up on this part because a lot of people know that I made some pretty strong critiques about the university and its relationship to Lubbock. And what I want to say for folks, when Grant says that it's important to get involved in the community, to be involved, and you need to show up, he walks that walk, and it's so impressive to me. He's a regular at neighborhood association meetings throughout the city of Lubbock. He's known in many of the communities across the city. Just a tireless advocate for trying to understand how the university can play a role in making the city better. And Grant, I told you this to you, earlier, but honestly, if the university needs, maybe 5 of you, something like that, if not more, because the work that you're doing and the way that you show that you care, it's just incredible. And it's just exciting for me to see you on here. And I just have to say something nice because I just appreciate, especially for somebody coming into Lubbock, right, moving to here from the outside, and just the engagement that you have done is just phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's the funny thing. I moved here in October of 2015, and the following week I was at J&B's selling tickets to the Holiday Home Tour. You know, my wife kind of roped me into that, and then of course that's one thing leads to another, and I have a hard time saying no. But I understand it's important, and working with there's different dynamics, but you get people to work together and you try to accomplish things and for the betterment of your community, and that's what you do. And at University Outreach and Engagement, I'm the community engagement manager, and that's what I do: go out into the community, engage, and I come up with all these wacky ideas of things that we can do that are kind of cool and interesting, and things that we did in Pittsburgh, or things that we did in Oak Park. So this is sort of an accumulation of ideas and knowledge that I'm borrowing from other people. What do they call? Imitation is the highest form of flattery. And even in the museum field, when you develop a collection policy, whatever, you look at different collection policies from other museums and what works for you, and you adapt, and that's what you do, and develop your own from those who have actually done it also. So you're not like reinventing the wheel. So a lot of these programs, a lot of these events are doing this, and this is sort of it's funny because I mean it's really a lot of what a lot of museums lack, and historical organizations and even neighborhood advocates, people out there, call it sales, call it advocacy, whatever, but that's what it's all about. That's what you all are doing. You're doing this Facebook thing. You're trying to get the word out, trying to promote and let people know the importance of getting involved, and that's it's kind of easy. I mean, it's what I do, and I'm sort of getting paid to do it. So,
Yeah, so
good for me.
yeah,
But
and
I mean, but it's something I would do anyway. I mean, it's just what you do, and now I'm also on the and I mentioned this earlier. I may have mentioned this earlier to you, Nick, that I'm on the I'm the citizen member of the Animal Services Advisory Board. And I'm working out, and one of the biggest problems they have is, guess what? Laundry. And I have a little background in laundry. And so it looks like I'm working out a deal with UniFirst, because they have the city contract to wash the towels for the animal shelter. Gratis.
Oh, that is, and I love that. That's such a, it's not something anybody would think about, but what a very useful and practical kind of, I'll call it public-private partnership. But just what a great little collaboration.
Yeah, UFirst has the city account, and they have an interest in keeping that account. It's a big account. UFirst, that was our competition when I worked for the linen company. But yeah, they're willing, hopefully, and we're playing phone tag, but the biggest concern was making sure we had enough towels to fill their wash wheels, because we're talking 300-pound wash wheels, 1,200-pound washers. It's called wash wheel utilization. You don't want to fill up the 300-pound washer with 100 pounds of laundry. That's your utilization is, you don't want that. Believe me, I ran a plant, and pounds per operator hour, this is important stuff. So we have more than enough stuff to fill up a 300-pounder. So we're going to work out something, hopefully, where we just each week drop off the dirty, pick up the clean. And that will alleviate a lot, because we just have a regular washer and dryer there. And you can never keep up drying what you can wash. You can wash a lot quicker than you can dry, especially cotton towels. And that's an issue. They don't have the wherewithal, but I also got Peller and Miller to willing to donate a commercial washing machine, a 50-pounder. But we'd have to install it. We need wiring, and they don't have the wherewithal to do that. But they were willing to donate a used washing machine. So these are things, my sales background, you get things done. But I guess you might say I'm a cultural sales rep, cultural.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into what we're talking about today, because one of the first things that you sold me on was this North by Northeast Arts Festival that I'm now a part of the board on.
Yes, you co-opted.
Yeah. It's a great idea, first of all. It didn't really take much convincing to sell me on this, but I can attest to your passion for connecting with people and pushing ideas along. And I'm just really appreciative for that. But let's talk about North by Northeast Arts Festival. What was the inspiration for this event? Where did this whole thing come from?
Well, back in 2000, I moved to the Lawrenceville section of Pittsburgh, and I was going to school. I just got my master's in history museum studies, and somebody bought me membership in the local historical society, and they were crashing and burning. They needed help. I got talked into helping them out, and it's sort of like a downtrodden, grungy industrial neighborhood where everything, the steel mill shut down, the steel industry crashed. So there was all this vacant, blighted warehouse space, industrial space. Somebody came up with the idea. There were a couple of people in the community that were sort of pretty cutting edge. One guy, Jay Soap, Jay Designs, I can't remember his last name. Poor guy passed away, but he was just very creative. And he's the one that came up with this, him and a couple of other people, this art all night thing, where, hey, let's take one of these abandoned buildings and repurpose it as an art space. And let's just do it all night long. And anybody could submit one work of art. And the first year they figured, well, worst case scenario, we'll just drink beer and, people show up, they show up. And it's really has taken off. I got involved in that from 2002 to 2005. I was the development committee, raising money, surprise, surprise. And just, it is open to anybody who wants to submit one work of art. And that's the important thing. It's not about the artist, it's about the art. So anybody could submit one work of art. I could do macaroni art and submit it and put a price tag on it. There's no fee, no jury, no censorship, no commission. People deal directly with the artist on whatever price they want to work at. And it's open to, like I said, anybody. But one work of art. You don't want, say, but people co-opting this once, taking over. And it's all arts. It's performance art. We have this group called the Zany Circus, whatever. They do this interactive stuff, poetry, drum corps. Drumming on 5-gallon tubs, just all sorts of things, and all night long. And it just started off and became a more gradual thing. So it really, now it's in its 24th year, and they get 1,000 works of art. They cut it off at 1,000, and they in 2019 pre-COVID they had 10,000 people show up for this thing. And it's not just it's not a neighborhood thing now. It's become a Pittsburgh thing, and it's sort of like a bohemian, no frills, taking part in this industrial funky place, and you're rethinking the space as an art space. And it really has brought people into the neighborhood, like, wow, they're doing cool stuff. So this was something we were doing. So here I am in Lubbock. I'm in with working with the North Lubbock Neighborhood Association over there in Jackson Mayhem. We're doing trash pickup, and Maddie Huerta, she's involved in that. So is Alice Lozada. And I pitched this idea to her, and she's like, "Wow, this is great! This is great! Wow, wonderful!" And then Marianne Lawson was there, and she said, "Well, I'm going to be going over to the East Lubbock Art House, Danielle." And I'm like, "I got to meet Danielle. I've read about her." That's where I met you, Adam, if you remember.
Yep.
You were painting over there.
I do remember.
And so I got this thing in my head over in the North community, and then I went over to the East community. I'm like, North by Northeast, a play on South by Southwest. So I'm like, why not? And let's focus on the North and East communities. Let's bring attention to these communities, because that's what we did in Lawrenceville. That, hey, they're doing some cool things there. This is what we want to do. We want to be a part of this. Maybe I'll open up a studio here. Maybe I'll move in here. These are the type of things you plant the seeds of really cool things. And that's what we did in Lawrenceville. And it's wildly popular. Google moved in. That helped, because you have a lot of hipsters that want cool stuff to do. And Art All Night is really one of those things. So this is a play on that. And once again, I'm, adapting this idea and then moving it to this. And then working with the McDougals, and good news. I just got off the phone earlier today, after we spoke earlier today, Nick, with Trey Smiley over at McDougall. And they rented a space in this building that they didn't think they'd be able to rent. Well, that fell through. So he wants me to, I'm going to shoot him a letter, and he's going to run it by Mark that we can reserve that space.
Okay.
What we can do and how we can hold because I said, I want to incrementally get in there and start doing things, because we're not a well-oiled machine like Pittsburgh. They could be up and running in a month. Oh, this is the space. Okay, good. We're ready to go. They have everything in place. We do not. So, I want to get in there and start gradually getting things ready. Let's get the panels up. Let's do this. We're still waiting to get our 501c3 status. That Greg and feed on that, so we can go out and in earnest ask for donations. Because several, we got HEB. I said I want food for like volunteers, and I want money, but you have to have that 501c3 designation, and I don't want to lie on the application, because that's not good to do those things. Make promises you can't keep either. That's my sales background, but a lot of people like to make bold statements and that they can't back up just because they're whatever. I digress. So
so it grew from this, or the idea for this obviously came from the Art All Night concept out in Pittsburgh, and you were heavily involved with that, obviously. What are some of the impacts that you know or think could happen on the Lubbock community, specifically those communities that maybe you've seen play out in Lawrenceville?
Well, Lawrenceville, Lawrenceville now, Lawrenceville is one of the most desirable neighborhoods actually in the country. The housing stock, you get all these businesses moved in, and there were empty stores, abandoned. Now, I go there now, and I'm like, what the hell used to be here? Now it's a public house, ale house. I'm like, what did this used to be? And trying to reimagine what these spaces were. They have a place called a Frankfurter place called Franktuary. So it's a hot dog place, Franktuary. So who knew gourmet hot dogs? That opened up. Vacant lots are not vacant anymore. They built condos and townhomes. It just really has done a lot for the community. So, I'm thinking that this is something that, bring attention to these communities, that people will open their eyes and say, wow, this is kind of cool. Let's invest in this community. Let's, open up a business. Let's, it usually starts with the artists. And this is what happened in Lawrenceville. It was sort of this bohemian people drinking beer and going, hey, let's have an art show. And it just blossomed into this really big thing now. And that's what I'd like to see happen in the North and East End. And I think it's prime for it, especially the warehouses over there on Avenue A from 19th down to 26th. McDougal owns that. That's a gateway to like Canyon Lakes in the East End. It's also a link to, to the Depot District underneath 2027, and you're there. So I think it could really be, and these buildings, you go inside, outside they don't look like much. They're sheet metal, corrugated metal type, but it makes sense for for the weather and stuff. But you go inside, and you've seen Adam, you've seen wooden beams and stuff. I mean, kind of cool.
Yeah.
And that's the idea. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just about to say it does. It's a really interesting space, and I think when you're in it and you, I'm just envisioning the event happening in this space, and I think it's just a space that's gonna. I think it's gonna stick with people especially once you have all this art and stuff in there. Like you said, it's something that's just super like regular that people drive by every day, but then when you go in, it's this really interesting space. Nick, hearing what because this is the thing, as you could probably tell, of why this wasn't a hard sell for me when Grant was telling me about this, because it really goes in line a lot with what Lubbock Compact is trying to do here in the city.
Absolutely.
So what are your thoughts hearing this?
Yeah, well, first off, I love it. And I think Grant, I think it's just a great example of how we can learn from the outside world as a community.
Mm-hmm.
It's not lost on me that the individual that began this process and proposed it had moved to Lubbock, had come to our community. And I think it's because of that. We need that kind of energy, that kind of ideas from folks that have seen things that have worked.
Yeah.
And know that that's the kind of energy, the kind of positivity that we can bring here. And in terms of the impact that it can have, I'm very optimistic about it. And we've seen cultural events in Lubbock have a similar impact. When you think about the First Friday Art Trail and what that now represents in the Lubbock community, I think about when that process began. And I was a high school student when a lot of that sort of began in the beginning. And I'll be frank, for kids back then, one of the reasons why you would go was because no one would card you for the free wine.
Of course,
different and stuff like that. Don't do that anymore. Don't drink underage. That's really bad. But that's something that people did, and
that's what teens do.
Right. And to see what it's become now, and the energy, the economic activity that it brings, and how businesses have capitalized on that. So I think Two Docks is a great example where they've had such great synergies with the First Friday Art Trail, both when it comes to just customers on that day, but brand visibility and their ability to market and to get their products out there. It's been incredible, for them to see that. And so if you'd have asked me, does Lubbock have room for another cultural event? Does Lubbock have room for another kind of one of these types of community gatherings? Yeah, absolutely. And the impact that it can have could be enormous.
Yeah. And that's
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Grant.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. Now I was gonna let you finish because I was gonna get into kind of how the event's gonna work. How does it all?
Yeah, and how it works. We Adam's working on the website. So, and one thing, Owen Lampy, he's the web guy in Pittsburgh. I've been talking to him quite frequently. He's even thinking of coming out here.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Then we found out, we're talking, sidebar. I said something about getting lost at the World's Fair. He goes, so what, 1964? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I was there. I'm like, okay. He goes, then I was at Expo 67. I'm like, so was I. I said, where are you from? He goes, oh, Jersey. I'm like, well, I'm from Long Island. So he's a transplant in Pittsburgh. But how it works is, people register one work of art. They show up. We have panels made up, and the 5 OSB board panels made up, so you can hang art on either side. The artists do not hang the art. We hang the art because hey, we're just going to put it up. So you're hustling and putting up the artwork. 4 o'clock, you have children's activities. We have somebody who's going to be doing paper making. Bruce Connect's going to do that. Children's activities, I think Danielle and Grace said they would do that. We do have art students involved. I do believe a couple of art professors are going to actually put this on their syllabus so that the students will get credit for this, to do this thing. We're going to have a live art section. This is something we did not do back in the day, where we provide a blank canvas, paintbrushes and paint, and people sign up a week in advance and they get to create a work of art on site. From what I
And you don't
understand,
have to be an artist, right, Grant? You don't have to be an artist. Like
no, you don't. And it's amazing, as Owen says, and I've seen some of the works in Pittsburgh, pretty darn good artwork. He said you'd be surprised, when people want to create. And then what we do is the next morning or at noon, we auction off that artwork. And that way, that money goes back into the next year. So we want this to be sustainable. Then, of course, there are grants we can apply for that we were too late to apply for. But once we got our 501c3 status, we can apply for grants. And it's not a lot of money we're talking here. We're talking about $5,000. Once we get the panels, we have those. We'll have them year in, year out, and we'll just reuse them. I was on the teardown committee too, and I was taking those sheetrock screws and putting them back in the bucket, to use them for the next year. So it's sustainable. So those are, so that, and then it goes. Now there's some debate. We're discussing whether this is going to go all night long. At Pittsburgh, it's all night long. Do we have to do all night long? We call it North by Northeast in the spirit of art all night. That area of town, like in Lawrenceville, there's Butler Street with restaurants and bars. Where you're talking about two docks over there by Luca, at least people can go there. There's really not a two docks around the corner there where people could go where you would, 2 in the morning, get a bite to eat and come back or something like that. So that's something open for discussion. I discussed that with Owen just the other day, whether or not we'd do that. But we've got Lucas supporting this, Charles Adams Studio Project supporting this, East Lubbock Art House, Norfolk Neighborhood Association, Lubbock Roots Historical Arts Council with Shirley Green. So there's a lot of people behind this and a lot of excitement. Here in Drain Hall, I'm talking it up to everybody, and then people that I didn't even talk about it mentioning it to me, like, oh yeah, they're going to do this art thing. By the way, it's the 16th and 17th of October. We're going to promote this at First Friday on the 1st of October. There's also going to be something called the Inside Out or Outside In Art Festival. I think the weekend before. That's a graduate project from the performing arts. Now, whether that happens or not, I'm not sure, but we'll have opportunities to promote this event at First Friday and that other event. Also, Blanca is looking to do something, I believe, on September 10th in a building. They're going to do it over at the Goldblatt building or Gold over there on 19th. So there are opportunities that we can promote this thing. And it's once again, it's music, live music, acoustic music, poetry reading. Like, if we don't do it all night, we'll open it up again Sunday morning, but that's when families come by because it's usually pretty crowded in the evening and they have to keep an eye on the little ones, but at least on the Sunday morning, it's quiet and the kids can run around and look at the artwork. Even the kids can sell their artwork too. They do QR codes. They do that. They scan it and they work something out with that. So that's the idea. And it's three-dimensional art. So you have sculptures, and if it's a bigger sculpture, they come and set it up earlier. If it's like an installation art piece, but it's all about the art. It's not about artists. It's art for everybody. And East Lubbock Art has a similar tagline to it. It's art, making art accessible to everybody, and that's sort of the same vein here. It's art for the masses.
So we talked about you kind of ran down some of the organizations that have been involved in this, and I've been really encouraged sitting through the meetings on this and just seeing the different folks and organizations that have popped up and and really, gotten involved in this. And it's been really cool to see. Good that it's getting such a good traction at this early stage.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know I kind of know this, but just for the listeners out there, what is the long-term vision for the event? Is this a one-off? Are we
Oh,
doing this?
no. This is going to be an annual event. This is going to be an annual event, North by Northeast, and once again, it's sort of a play on South by Southwest. Why not Lubbock? When I was in Pittsburgh, we were the redheaded stepchild. It was all Philadelphia, and what did we have? We had, the Homestead riot, we had the railroad strike, 1877, the Homestead massacre, hell with the lid off. Philadelphia has the Liberty Bell. They have Independence Hall. They have Benjamin Franklin. All these more inspirational parts of our history, more favorable.
Of the United States at one point.
So we were like, well, what about us? What about us in Pittsburgh? We count too. We were called the sovereign state of Pittsburgh one time at a museum conference, the Pennsylvania Federation of Museums and Historical Organizations that I was a member of. And go Eagles. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, go Eagles. No, back in World War II, is the Steelers and Eagles, as a matter of fact, because they didn't have enough people. And even like Charlotte, I was in Charlotte, the Society of North Carolina Archivists. We were not the triangle with Duke and UNC Chapel Hill and NC State and Elon. The triangle, we had UNC Charlotte, which was not considered a intellectual or academic powerhouse. So we came up with our group of archivists. We call ourselves the Sharkivists, Charlotte Archivists. And we showed them how we did things. And then they started imitating what we did for our socials. So, we sort of like, I have this chip on my shoulder. So I'm carrying it here from Lubbock. And why not Lubbock? I went to an event in Austin, some art opening, and the people were so beautiful and cool, I wanted to throw up. It was a certain type of clique, sipping on their Topo Chicos, and but when you go to First Friday, you talk about everybody, young, old, people of color. It's a community event. You don't get that in Austin. Austin's sort of like an artist clique, and I was like, oh yeah, these are just really, really beautiful people here. I think this is the whole idea behind it. This is why not Lubbock, and let's do this, and it's for everybody. And I'm hoping and praying that this will be sustainable. And from one year to the next, I really like to talk to the McDougals about doing something with that whole complex, like the silo district over in Waco. Let's convert these things, because they're having a hard time running them. Let's reinvent this space. Let's get a brewery over there. Let's get a distillery over there. You have that green space where the railroad tracks are. Pull up the railroad tracks, make a beer garden there, whatever. But it could really be like, artisan galleries and exhibit space and studios, and just walk through the whole area there and just make it really something cool. And if they can't rent it as storage space, I think those buildings are much more better served as exhibit space or something else, because it's really cool structures inside. You don't see a lot of timber around here, and to see that in these buildings, like, this is kind of cool. So I'd like to think of that, and once again, when I was talking to Trey today, I was talking up that idea, and he didn't say I was crazy. He's like, yeah. So that could be really cool for the North and East communities. So those are my long-term plans.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And you finished 1 minute before the end of our show. That was absolutely perfect. Well, as we always say, we could stay on here for hours.
Oh, we could. I didn't even go to public transportation.
Yeah, we didn't even go to the light rail.
We need one, just for a special episode, for light rails.
We really should.
Just for light rails.
We really should. Yeah, Grant has a great idea for a light rail system here in Lubbock. We can't get into it, but me and Grant often go at length on the phone, so we know how this can get. But thanks to everybody. Thanks, first of all, to Grant for joining us on the show.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and thank you all for what you guys do. It's important.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's very important. And Texas Tech, we're here to help. So we're trying trying to get resources out of it. That sounds like, government, we're here to help. But there's nothing wrong with that either to a certain extent. But no, I mean, that's the thing we want to match, like getting the art students on the syllabus for art students to get credit for, or architecture students to look at that space and say, how can we figure out this space for this event? That's what we want. We want students to provide their expertise to help, and they get something out of it in real life experience. And that's, and we want to find out what you all need. We don't want to tell you what you all need. Although I sort of came up with this North by Northeast thing. So
Yeah.
But you all embraced it. You didn't kick the curb.
So for more information on this, everybody, you can follow us on Lubbock Compact's page. We will definitely be updating you as this moves along. We will also have the North by Northeast website completed. We're just getting some ends tied up there. And so that will also be a contact point for that. And of course, Lubbock Compact will share that with everybody, and we'll be working hard on the North by Northeast team as well.
Absolutely.
The great folks over there to get the word out. So you will not be able to miss North by Northeast. Trust me. You can keep up with policy issues in Lubbock by subscribing to our newsletter at lubbockcompact.com. It's right on the front page. We send those out monthly right now. You can also sign up to volunteer at lubbockcompact.com/volunteer. You can donate if you so choose by going to lubbockcompact.com/donate. You can, of course, listen to our audio version of this show wherever you listen to your podcast, and follow us and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you'd like a free way to help us out. Even better, give us a like on a video and a comment. That's a free way to help spread the message, and this is all about just keeping folks informed and letting you know what's going on that some other media outlets may not cover. So Grant, thanks again.
Thank you, and keep on fighting the good fight, gentlemen.
Likewise.
Yeah, you take care.
Good night.